Hi everybody, Jeff Yasteen here. By all means, make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't done so already, and follow me on Twitter and on Facebook. So I wanted to go back to a sector that's been very, very hot of late, really the last handful of months especially, and that is the cannabis sector, the pot sector. Now, I did a whole video on my 3 favorite pot stocks back on January 6th. In the wake of the Georgia Senate election, which, as many of us had realized, was obviously going to sort of turn the federal government's legislative capabilities towards the cannabis sector and basically help to even out the playing field so that the cannabis sector could grow and have a good solid legislative footing, know exactly what the laws are, and banking laws that would fit better in terms of helping the companies in that sector to grow. So I wanted to go back to it again though, because number one, the 3 stocks I recommended have all done well. Aphria is one stock I recommended, and since I discussed it on January 6th, the shares are up 93%. I also mentioned a second stock, which is really one of the pioneers in the pot sector, which is Canopy Growth. And since mentioning it on January 6th, it's up 46%. I also mentioned a company called Trulieve Cannabis, symbol TCNNF, trades on the bulletin board, but is a very liquid stock for a bulletin board company. And since talking about it, it's up about 9% or so after already having had a really good run over the past year or so. And I expect that the stock will continue to move higher, but it's going to take a little time just because a lot of the growth has already been sort of discounted into the current share price. So now I wanted to tell you about one stock that I left off of that video that I think is still very viable here and is sort of an under the radar cannabis stock. The name of the company is Village Farms, symbol VFF. So here is a look at Village Farms stock chart over the last 4 years or so. And as you can see, it has a fair amount of volatility. But most of the volatility is to the upside, obviously, as long as the stock continues to make some headway here. And we had a nice move in the late 2017 of, it tripled. Then it backtracked over the course of 2018, had another gigantic move higher from around 3 to 16, retraced that entire amount back to the lows of the prior year. And then since basically the bottom of the pandemic, in March of last year, the shares are once again up about 5-fold, almost 6-fold here. So the question is, what else is going to get this stock moving even higher? So here's the thing about Village Farms. It's actually known, its main focus of operations since the start is actually as a grower of greenhouse grown produce, like tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, and the like. And I believe it's actually the largest grower of greenhouse grown produce in North America. It's actually known, its main focus of operations since the start is actually as a grower of greenhouse grown produce, like tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, and the like. And I believe it's actually the largest grower of greenhouse grown produce in North America. And much of its greenhouse operations are based in Canada and elsewhere. And these are just some pictures of its huge, massive greenhouse operations that are scattered in, in key areas around Canada and elsewhere. But as always, in any good company, any good stock, there's what's generally known about a company, and then there's the new information which may not be factored into the stock price yet. And that's what's interesting about Village Farms. Basically last summer, the company announced that they were going to be using some of their greenhouse capacity to also grow cannabis. So this is where that news came out in this article from last June in an online newsletter operation that covers the horticulture industry. And it says Village Farms to place marijuana crops in greenhouses. A grower announces new joint venture for first 25 acres. And basically it's a joint venture that's going to convert or has converted the greenhouse facility into something that can produce about 75,000 kilograms of medical grade and recreational marijuana for the adult use market. So that's the first part of it, but the second part is where the company says, based on our conservative market pricing forecast and yield projections, conversion of our Canadian greenhouse facilities to cannabis could generate revenue of 10 to 15 times that of our current Canadian vegetable productions, with EBITDA, which is basically cash flow margins, potentially expanding to more than 50% compared to our current Canadian vegetable margins. So the key here, what is basically happening is you have a company that's sort of pivoting from its expertise in vegetable produce production under a greenhouse environment and taking that expertise and applying it to cannabis. Now, obviously, there are always risks in these sorts of things because, and I'm no expert in these things, certainly in the specifics of it, but, there are certain things growing cannabis that don't exactly apply to growing produce. But at the same time, the overall operation and management of a greenhouse operation and the fact that those greenhouses are basically already bought and paid for, now you're just basically putting a crop that is essentially a lot more valuable under those greenhouses. That is a huge development for the company. So I don't think all of this has really been factored into the stock as yet. So the question, of course, is, well, why isn't it completely factored into the stock here? Why would the stock continue to move even higher after having had a fairly nice run already the last 5-6 months? And I think you can see where the stock is going to go from here based on the earnings projections. And we have those right here. Last year, the company, when it reports its final results, which will be March 16th, 10 cents a share is what the company should earn for 2020. But thanks in part to the switch into cannabis production, we're going to see the shares, the profits for the company rise to, a projected rise to 52 cents a share. 2022, $1 a share, $1.58 a share in 2023. And again, all these being forecasts, so there's always risk that they don't hit those forecasts, but 2024, $2.69 a share. So from this point, essentially with the shares trading at 14, what we can do is take those earnings forecast projections, and again, we're presuming that those projections are going to be correct. And that's part of the risk of owning any stock, is that when Wall Street analysts or people like myself make our earnings projections, there's always the chance that you're wrong and that the growth forecasts don't pan out the way you think. The companies run into delays sometimes, or the expansion that they thought could work didn't work. But in this case, we know about Village Farms. We know that it has a successful, somewhat lower margin vegetable growing operation that does reasonably well under this greenhouse growing model that they have. And now they're switching into this marijuana sector instead, which again seems like it should work. So what we do is we take that $14 a share and we use our earnings projections to divide into that number. So what we do is bring up my online calculator here. We know that the shares are currently trading at $14 a share. And we know that in 2021, the analysts who cover the stock expect the company to earn around 52 cents a share. That's 52 cents US. And so we take that $14 a share as a stock price, divide by 52 cents a share, and we get a PE ratio of 26. Now, as we can tell here, the shares aren't really any higher now than they were back in 2019. So essentially the stock has gone sideways over the last 2 years. So clearly that's another reason why I think that the switch into cannabis production really hasn't been factored into the stock yet, since that announcement really only came out in the middle of last summer. So next, then, we know that the shares are currently being valued at around 26 times its 2021 profits. So what do we do next? We take that 26 multiplied by the projections of what the company should earn in 2022, which is $1 a share in profits. So what does that do for the stock? Well, $1 times 26, that's the PE ratio, gets us a share price of $26. Sometime maybe late this year or early 2022. Remembering that stocks always move up in anticipation of future results, presuming those results are good. And obviously, if the market sniffed out that this wasn't working, you would expect to see the share price move lower at some point, or perhaps on negative news. But we haven't seen that sort of thing happen yet. So then we can project this further out. Obviously, there's more and more error that's introduced in these sorts of things, but this is how analysts put their price projections on stocks as well. So we know that analysts expect at this point that Village Farm will earn $1.58 a share in profits for 2023. Again, that's 2 years out. If we multiply by the current PE ratio of 26, that's $41 a share as a price forecast from the current $14, looking out, basically 3 years here, 2.5 years. And again, if we wanted to go even further out, you go $2.69 a share as the projection of what analysts think the company will earn in 2024 times the current valuation of 26 times its price earnings ratio. Now you're looking at a stock price of roughly $70 a share. So, that's essentially how it's done. That's how you take earnings and the future projections of earnings, knowing that there's always risk in these sorts of things. But you take those projections of future earnings, and then you look at what's the value, what's the PE value that investors are placing on a stock, and then you can project it forward from there. Again, there's always risk, but there's also lots of reward. And for a stock like Village Farms, priced at $14 a share, the same as it was back in early 2019, I think this switch in the cannabis production is still only barely being factored into the stock, and it's something maybe we should look at here in coming quarters and see how this switch in the cannabis production continues to play out. If you like what I'm talking about, make sure to continue to follow me on Twitter and Facebook, and make sure to subscribe to my YouTube page. I'm Jeff Yasteen.